Boys, well, hello everyone, and welcome to this week's show. I am SHETAN NOIR, and this is High Strangeness in the Liminal Abyss. And on this week's show, one of the things I wanted to talk about is something I mentioned last week in reference to creepypasta. And I don't think people understand the difference between creepypasta, urban legends, historical folklore, eyewitness accounts, and all the different stuff they hear on podcasts and YouTube, and sometimes on TV shows. Um, for the most part, anything that you see on TV has to be taken with a grain of salt, because even if it is a real life reenactment, oftentimes your TV producers and networks want it to be more spectacular than what the actual story tells out to be. So they will embellish things, they will elaborate things, they will actually change the story, the circumstances, the evidence, and the details to benefit or enhance the episode of the show. So you're not always getting the real truth. And oftentimes, the people whose stories are told will sometimes go on to a podcast that they trust and give their true story, give the real story. That normally, when you compare the two, you will see that, yeah, it differs quite greatly. I've had this happen to me, and it actually happened when another author decided to use the forward that I use in my Flying Cryptid book as a part or a chapter for their book. And even though I had told them and read them the forward word for word, and they had a copy of the forward, they still took it on themselves to change different aspects of the story. So I had to inform people that the actual true story is the one that's the forward in my own book on flying cryptids, and not the one that is published in the chapter of this other author's book. And we find that a lot in both the paranormal and cryptozoology. Hey, dogman. Sorry. The summer windows are open and the dogmen can hear other dogmen barking throughout the neighborhood. Um, but we find this happening a lot where even though a person has a eyewitness testimony, other people take it upon themselves to embellish that story, enhance that story to make it that much more spectacular, when in truth, the fact that they actually had a eyewitness count or a situation or an experience is pretty spectacular in itself. Why do people, producers, authors, journalists, whatever, podcasters feel the need to embellish upon the already, given statement? So now, creepypasta, which some people may not understand the term, creepypasta is basically stories that are produced and generated and copy and pasted and shared all over the internet, that are usually scary, creepy, or along that lines in nature. And they're shared and copied and pasted so much that the original source of them is often hard to track down and find. Creepypasta is the internet's version of word spoken stories of urban legends, where they might have a grain of truth out there somewhere where this actual event played out. But it's been retold so many times by so many different people that the names get changed. It's always, well, a friend of mine or a cousin of mine or this person I know heard about this or this happened to them. And it goes from person to person and it's carried on. Some ones that, most people might know are like the Crybaby Bridges, the hook, the hook hand one, where the guy, the couple's making out in their car, and there's a news flash all of a sudden on the radio of a escaped inmate from the prison or the insane asylum, and he's got a hooked hand, and the people hear something around their car and they get freaked out and they drive away, and later on when they get home they find a hook jammed into the the door handle or something like that. So your creepy pasta is the internet's version, essentially, of what we nowadays call an urban legend, or what we used to call urban legends. Now, historical folklore is a little bit similar, but not. Your historical folklore is stories and folklore tales that have been passed down for many centuries, many generations. We see this a lot with Native American tribes, the different stories that they have of, like, Inabichu, the great underwater panther, the thunderbird, the tall man, even Wendigo, skinwalkers, things of those natures, where they have a time-honored tradition of a story that they pass down generation from generation. And generally, when you're talking of the Native American, the story, as it's passed down generation by generation, has not changed. They are very specific in the way that the story is told, in the line of you know each word of the sentence is spoken, the way that it is embellished upon, it's acted upon. All of these things are very specific, and so the stories do not change a lot. It's when the stories are told to outside cultures, such as us, uh, you know, um, here in the United States or other countries, that we add things in because maybe that story doesn't sound quite as cool as we want it to. So we add here, we take away there, and eventually the story loses its Grayson, its different perspectives. So all these things change the story once it has been told. It's almost like that old game of telling a secret around a campfire, and when the last person to repeat it to the first person who told it, it's usually generally very different from when they told it. So if you have 10 people sitting around in a circle, try this. Come up with a basic story and you tell it to the person next to you, and they are supposed to tell the person next to them that same story, and it repeats going around the circle. And then when that very last person, that ninth person, tells it to the 10th person, and then that 10th person tells it to you, see how much that basic story that you told has changed. And then you can see just through process how urban legends, folklore, even creepypasta gets changed from storyteller to storyteller to fit how we think that the story should be told. And I'm seeing this a lot with podcasts. Generally, somebody will come out with a eyewitness statement, and they become a very hot topic for a short while on the different paranormal encrypted podcasts, and they'll tell their story. And after a couple of months goes by, you start hearing on some of these other podcasts, some of these creepypasta um, podcasts, a very similar story, but maybe the state's changed. Maybe the monster, the cryptid has changed. Maybe instead of a group of people, it's just a couple, or maybe instead of a man, it's a woman, or vice versa. Maybe instead of a group of adults, it's a group of teenagers or kids. But you start to hear some very basic elements in all these stories. And as you're listening to them, you start to catch which one, okay, that might have been a real live person's, predicament and encounter. But no, this next one is definitely something made up. When somebody's being so elaborative and descriptive in their story, and you're like, did you really have time to stand there and gaze out upon the night's meadow, and see all the fireflies individually flickering and lighting up the sky and matching the sky above with the starlight and blah 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 blah, and then all of a sudden a hairy tall monster jumps out of the bushes at you and chases you for a half mile back to your car that was only 50 feet away. Yeah, then you can start to see where the creepy pasta has kicked in, and it's not the actual eyewitness telling of the story that you might have wanted to hear. And, now you're sitting here listening to this going, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. Another giveaway is when the story goes, this isn't my story, it's my grandfather's or my uncle's or my best friend's cousin, or something of that. Hi, dog man. Something of that nature. And so you're not getting the firsthand telling of it. You're getting the parts of the story that you remember that caught in to, that person's, acceptance of the story. Maybe they would rather have Dogman in the story than Bigfoot, or, an alien creature than, Dogman. And so it's those interpretations that change the story, and sometimes not for the better. Um, but we get that a lot with these different retellings of the stories. So it's very hard unless you're talking to the actual in-person eyewitness who experienced the event and had, witnessed this phenomena. Unless you're speaking to that person who experienced it, then the only thing you have to go on is the accounts from somebody else. And you have to realize that you're probably not getting, one, the correct story, two, the actual story, three, the actual details. Because if they don't know the actual details, they'll probably just fill those in and add them along on their own, which is why it makes it so hard as researchers to know if it's the real story you're hearing or if it's a made up story you're listening to. So I want people to keep that in mind as they are listening to podcasts or any TV shows, any documentaries. Just because it's on YouTube or on TV or on a podcast does not mean it's the actual true story. So those are my thoughts for this week. Let me know what you think. And until next week, go out there and explore this cool world and stay curious out there. Goodbye.